On this episode of Narcissist Apocalypse, we talk with an abuse survivor named Bruce. And Bruce was married to a narcissist that turned his world upside down once they had a child together. It's a story of financial abuse, court abuse, and a master manipulator. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, a podcast that gives a voice to survivors of narcissistic abuse. I am Brandon Chadwick, but my friends call me Chad, and thanks for tuning in to this episode. So what is a narcissist, you may ask? Well, for the purposes of this podcast, we refer to a narcissist as anyone who has displayed a pattern of behavior that shows a limited capacity to appreciate others' perspectives. It is that simple. And now, before we get to our episode with Bruce, I just wanted to thank everyone in the Narcissist Apocalypse community for listening to the show and sharing your thoughts by email, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Also, a reminder, if you have not left us a review on whatever podcast service you use, Spotify, Apple, Google, Stitcher, CastBox, etc., please leave us a 5-star written review, as it helps out the show a lot when it comes to rankings. Did I say written review? Written review. I think it didn't really come out that well. But anyway, now if you haven't been to our website recently, please do go there if you want to be part of our show. Our website is narcissistapocalypse.com, and fill out the guest form and we will go from there. But the quickest way to be part of our show is to go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com and to read a letter to your narcissist and be part of our Letters to Our Narcissist compilation episode. We have a voicemail recorder on our website to record. You go to narcissistapocalypse.com. Right side of the page, there's a button there. It's always floating around. It's hard to miss. And it says send voicemail. Press it and away you'll go. We're accumulating these letters to have a volume 3 of that episode. So send those voicemails in. And if you want us to read a letter instead for you, me or my old pal Melissa will do it. Just send your letter to narcissistapocalypse@gmail.com. Other things on our site, we're now offering a high-conflict parenting courses that can be found at narcissistapocalypse.com/courses. Yes, we have now partnered with an online parenting company, and many of these courses we are offering were created by Bill Eddy. And if you've listened to our episode last year with a divorce lawyer named Helen, you'll know that Bill Eddy is an expert in dealing with these individuals in court, and now he's helped create many parenting courses to help you through divorce and to help support your children too. These courses are the most widely recognized courses by family courts across the country. So if you want to support the show and are looking for guidance, please do go to narcissistapocalypse.com/courses. What else do I got on my list here? Well, we have another podcast called Narcissist Apocalypse Q&A, and it is now available for your listening pleasure. Our first 11 episodes have been released, and on the last one, I got hypnotized by a hypnotherapist and a worldwide coach named Colleen Marie. It was quite the episode, quite the experience. And this week, we'll be having the return of an audience favorite, and that is Shireen Pekar. And we will be discussing divorce and parallel parenting with a narcissist. So if you're looking for a therapist or a coach like the ones I just mentioned from our Q&A podcast, please do go to abusetherapy.org. And if we don't have someone in your area, let us know and we will help find one for you using abusetherapy.org. Helps support the show. But do you know what else helps support the show? Our Patreon. Yes, we started a Patreon. And if you want to hear episodes that never made it to air, follow-up episodes with former guests, and much, much more, join our Patreon. We'll be releasing new content on there every week. So to help support the show, become a patron of our Patreon at patreon.com/narcissistapocalypse. We also started an Instagram and a YouTube channel, and we started making fun pop culture narcissist-based videos, but we also created a new one last week about the power of storytelling, and I discussed the healing process by using the formula that we have on this show. So if you want to help yourself feel less shame, go check out that video on Instagram or on our YouTube under Narcissist Apocalypse. And now, before I get out of your way, I do throw a couple of jokes out there during today's recording, as Bruce is a big Bruce Springsteen fan, and we were joking around about it before the call, and that's why his name is actually Bruce for the show. And also, Bruce really wanted to come on the show today and hammer home some educational points for people and not just tell his story, and I want to thank him for doing so. And like all of you, Bruce is just a really good person. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you, Bruce, for being on the show. And now it's time for me to get out of my way and your way. Here is my conversation with Bruce.
Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse. With me today, I have Bruce. How are you, Bruce?
I'm good, Brandon. I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me and doing this podcast and everything. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome. And everyone else out there who is listening, I hope you're doing well as well and hope you're staying safe with everything that is going on. And now I'm going to get out of my way and your way and give the floor to Bruce, who is born to run. The floor is now yours.
Thank you. That's good. I'm in a position now, with dealing with this thing, we call narcissistic abuse. And as I mentioned, a year ago, this word was literally not in my vocabulary. And, I've really been exhausting myself, the past year, to figure out what's been happening, in my life. I've basically, my story is I married a woman, who's just a complete sociopath. And, and that's not hyperbole, we've had a 5-year relationship, and right now I have a daughter 20 months old with her. And, it's been a year of me going through the process of recovery, and, validation's a big thing, and informing yourself and everything. So this podcast kind of plays a role in that. I see the word sociopath, I kind of mean that in these people, whether they're borderliners or histrionics or, antisocials or narcissists. I just say sociopath because, whatever it is that's with them, these behaviors, it's patterned, and it's clearly there's something pathological there, when you see these patterns and you hear these podcasts and people describing, these same behaviors. My sociopath is a woman I married, and basically I'll start off with a linear timeline, I guess, to kind of share my story, and hopefully there's some resources in there that other people can kind of use and help help them with their processing of everything. When I met this woman, I was still in the Army. I served in the Army for 10 years. Did a lot of cool stuff in the Army. I traveled around. I've been to over 40 countries. I completed my bachelor's and my master's degree. I say all this not to be boastful, but to kind of put into context how well I was doing and how devastating this abuse is. How devastating to put into context. And, when I met this woman, this was in 2015. I was doing really well for myself. I was still in the service. I was finishing my bachelor's degree with a double major. I graduated in the top 5% of my class, while working full time in the Army, and I was really set on, I want to get married. I want to have a family. I was really intentional about that. And I was making it clear, when I met this person, I was making it very clear that, I was looking for something, real. And these people kind of hone in on that, when they meet you, you can have, you could be completely secure in yourself and have never experienced, this type of abuse before. And you can be completely healthy and secure. And when you experience, the initial idealization or love bombing, it's like nothing you have ever experienced. It's really like a freight train that hits you sideways. You can, all this literature I'm reading now, like I mentioned, I could have read this 5 years ago, I still wouldn't have really understood the gravity of this, of the gaslighting, you know, of the stonewalling, of, you know, the projection, you know, of the smear campaign. Like, you could learn it and you can know these words and these patterns, but even if you don't experience it or know someone personally who's really experienced it, it's just so hard to fathom. And you know, people, you know, I think I speak for a lot of people when you try and figure out these behaviors. You try and, you know, put them into context. You try and find the words to describe them. And, you know, marriage therapists won't really get it. You know, your family members won't really get it. It's very hard, you know, to really find validation. And so, you know, it's good that this podcast exists. People can listen to each other and really, you know, we'll have completely different experiences in life, but the patterns are there. The abuse is there. And it's so impactful, and you can, when someone has lived it, you see it, you know. And so my story is like everyone else's. At the beginning, I met this person. They were completely all over me, idealized me, wanted to show me around to all their family and friends. You know, this is the love bombing, idealizing me, wanting to learn everything about me, everything that I was into. You know, they also shared, you know, the same interests, you know, curiously. And it's powerful. And you think that in the beginning, and this is what leads into the trauma bonding and how people allow this abuse to occur. In the beginning, when you meet this, you know, I met this person, I was really like, you know, really, you know, very, very upfront about my intentions with relationships and wanting to have a family. And this person, these people feed off of that. You know, they kind of play into it, and they idealize you. And this woman, you know, you think, oh, this woman wants to show me around so much to all her friends and her family. She must really love me. You know, she must really be proud of me. Wow, you know, this person wants to show me off to everyone and is so proud of all my accomplishments and everything I've done in life. And little by little, those things change, you know, those things kind of morph into something else. And this is how idealization goes into devaluation, and you get trauma bonded. And so these people, this woman I was with, little by little started being controlling and wanted me, you know, I would be at home, you know, on a Friday doing economics homework for grad school, and then we would be at a bar with all her friends and would get into fights with me, you know, that I'm not with her. Like, you know, it's just odd stuff. It kind of develops. And like, this is where, you know, this devaluation happens, little by little. And it's difficult because, you know, when you go through this person I met, it was difficult because this woman would be, you know, after about a year of dating her, I noticed that there would be big ups and downs. And so this woman, you know, if there was a little like minor, you know, issue that we were dealing with in a relationship, she would have just zero empathy, just no empathy. And she would just say, oh, you're emoting, you know, or you're too sensitive, you know, and this is when the devaluing starts, when you see their behaviors and you try and call them out on it like a normal range adult does. You know, you want to address problems, you know, these people refuse to. And it's disorienting. And so this is what kind of was developing. And I remember early on in the relationship, literally about 3 months into it, this woman accused me of trying to sleep with her best friend. And it was just the most bizarre thing. And it was odd. And I remember breaking up with her at these moments. And, you know, she wanted me to go out back to brunch with her. And, you know, I said to her, I said, you know, you do things that hurt people and then you blame them for being hurt. And I said, it's like you're a narcissist. And that was over 5 years ago. I look back at that now and I'm like, holy shit, like it's a huge flag that I said, you know, 3 months into a relationship, and you just don't, at the time you say this word narcissist colloquially, you don't really, you know, you don't really get the full scope of it because it's just inhuman behavior. But like it was there, and I was seeing things, and I was trying to set boundaries, and it was there. And like, this is, you know, when you look back at the relationship, it's amazing how when you educate yourself on this type of abuse, it's amazing how you see all the patterns and all the flags. So I saw that early on. After a year of dating her, the devaluing was happening. The woman was getting controlling. Little by little, I started getting isolated from my family, my friends, and everything had to be about her. and this is basically, this is the way of isolating. One of the patterns of abuse is isolating. So they little by little isolate you, from your support group. And this is how, you get closer trauma bonded. And one of the things I noticed after a year of dating her, now we're in 2016, this woman would engage in abusive behavior. Like, she would drink and hit me, and I'm 6 feet tall, I'm 200 pounds. I've never been hit by a woman. And this woman would drink and would hit me. Like, she's punched me, smacked me, kicked me, elbowed me, and grabbed me by the throat and stuff. And like, I've never experienced anything like that. And it's like, even you tell people, say, well, why did you deal with that? Why did you, And it's just strange because this type of sociopath that I had was covert and feeds off of sympathies. And so when I first met her, going back a bit, when I first met her, her story was, I was in an abusive relationship. There was domestic violence, and I'm a victim of domestic violence. So these people learn they literally hunt for people like us, people with empathy, people with normal range.
Was that one of the big things that got you hooked originally, the sympathy aspect and the guilt, and what other kind of things hooked you in? She was mirroring everything you were doing as well?
Yes. So the mirroring was there. At the time, I was in the Army and stuff, but, I like, I'm in a big city. I like going to operas and musicals and stuff like that. And this woman was like into that. Or so I thought. So like, that's the mirroring. Everything you're into, they copy and you think, wow, this person shares my same interests. So that hooks you in.
What was the big thing that hooked you where you're like, yes, like, or not yes, but like that, like you were fully hooked. You're like, this is sealed the deal.
Yes, the big thing was how proud she was of me, how she wanted to show me to all of her family, all of her friends, all of the time.
So it
blows you away.
Is it fair to say that all of a sudden you got your self-worth and self-esteem was now taken away from being something that you already had, but was now put into her court, where her court was giving you this self-esteem and giving you this thing. Yeah. So now you've moved across the line and it is now shifted into her possession. And once it was in her possession, did that become a huge problem kind of going forward? Because I wrote down here, when you say, because I have to read my writing here. When you say that you're doing well, and that's not, at the beginning of your story, that's not just saying you're doing well work-wise or you're doing well with the Army and all of your accomplishments. You're doing well mentally. You're coming into this thing. Yes. You're coming into this thing with nothing kind of beforehand. You're coming in like as a psychologically well-balanced person.
Exactly. Yes, I'm coming into this. I'm like literally, I've everything I was doing, all my endeavors in the service, in undergrad and grad school. I mean, I was successful. I was dominating. I was doing very well. I was getting my graduate research. I was getting published in op-eds. I was then published in Russian language, Arabic, English. I was doing good. I was like in great shape. I was running 5 to 10 miles a day. I was reading voraciously. I finished my bachelor's in 4 years while working full time. I went 3 weeks later, I went straight into a graduate degree program while still in the Army. And it's like a top 5 program in the U.S. I mean, to say that I was doing well is an understatement. I was doing it excellent. And so these people kind of, when you see them, that's the significant that you pointed out, because you can be healthy, mentally, physically healthy, and you still meet a sociopath. And there's nothing to prepare you. Everyone has their own childhood things that they deal with that can lead into codependency and repetition compulsion, where you repeat bad experiences in relationships. That's all real. But I was not just some wounded duck that this woman found. These people target people for their strengths. They do not target people who are weak. They target people who have empathy, who have emotional intelligence, who are willing to self-reflect and take blame for problems in relationships. That's who they target. They target us for our strengths. And that's an important thing to kind of reiterate for everyone who's recovering from abuse. Don't feel like, you're like wounded. Know that you were being, preyed on, And so, yeah, that's exactly it. I was doing very well. I met this woman. I was mentally, physically doing well, excelling everything I was doing. And little by little, you end up losing your sense of self. And this is where idealization can really just systematically break down boundaries. And that's what leads into trauma bonding and to cope and these abusive patterns and how you get sucked into it. So that's completely accurate. And little by little, after a year of dealing with this, from 2015 into 2016, this woman would engage in abusive behavior that just was so confusing and disorienting. And when you're experiencing it, it's just, you've never really dealt with people who do this. And so, like, when I would try to confront her on it, she would engage in stonewalling. So she would ghost me. She would not talk to me. She would not allow the problem to get addressed. So she would withhold communication. She would withhold closure, and she would stonewall. And she would do that, and I would literally go for like a week of being confused and overwhelmed, like, what's happening? And I would start sending texts and emails. Oh, I love you. I hate you. You're doing anything at this point to elicit some normal range emotional response from these people. And so little by little, this is the crazy making, So this woman would literally engage in stonewalling, and after like a week of it, I would be on the couch. This is 2015. I would be on the couch with fevers, and I just had no clue what was happening. And it was like my health was deteriorating. I would break up with her, after about a week of this happening. She would come to my house in a yellow cab, midnight after drinking a bottle of wine, say, "Oh, babe, I'm so sorry. I don't know why I do this. I'm so sorry. I'm dealing with work and this and that." And again, this is the initial hook, the sympathy. They're preying on you for being a normal range person. They're preying on you for having empathy and wanting to care about people. They're preying on that. And so this is what she used. And at the time, you rationalize it. In 2015, when you start going these abusive patterns, and it's physically and mentally breaking you down, you start rationalizing it and you say, "Oh, well, this person's hurting me," but they're willing to come and back and say they made a mistake. They're clearly, willing to admit their faults and they're good relationship material. But it's like, that's where you're wrong. That's why I was wrong, because this woman wanted her behaviors that she would admit things in private and wouldn't really allow them to be addressed later on. We went to a marriage therapist, or when we're talking in front of family or friends, and that's something that's intermittent reinforcement. These people abuse you and they devalue you, but they don't want to lose you because they want that supply. They need that supply for their narcissistic supply, for their ego, for their false self. And so they want to give you that intermittent reinforcement, and they do it privately to kind of reel you in. And this is how you get trauma bonded, because you go through these just chaotic emotions that you're feeling from this disorienting abuse. And the only thing that kind of makes the pain go away is to talk to them again, because you want to return to that stage when they loved you, when you thought they loved you, when you thought you were creating unconditional love. But that doesn't exist. So, this is what this is where I was at in 2016. And this woman, again, would engage in the silent treatment. And, for a week at a time, I would break up with her. And, I thought I was testing the relationship, setting boundaries by breaking up with her. And then she would come back, and I'm thinking, okay, I set a boundary. But, you little by little lose yourself in that. And your boundaries just keep getting walked back. And you totally start being reliant on these people, because they just systematically wear you down to where you're the one contributing everything to the relationship, and they're contributing nothing. And so that's why I say they prey on people with strengths to be able to carry that, And so 2016 was happening. I'm in the Army. I'm in grad school. I'm doing amazing. I'm working full time. Little by little, I started having health problems. And I didn't know what it was. And, at this time, this woman, I was in the Army. I had, pretty unique experiences. I've been hit by roadside bombs and all this stuff. That's something I was completely aware of that I was volunteering for. It was something I was completely, cognizant of. And, so you go into those types of experiences as someone in the military with that level of resilience. You know you're going to deal with this. You train for that. You have the personality to volunteer yourself to take on those things. And so I experienced all that, and I was doing good, and I didn't go into, I wasn't, overseas in war. The last time I was there, it was over a decade ago. So you're looking at when I'm in 2016, now it was at least like 6 years since I've been into war, and I'm doing good in all of this stuff. So when 2016 was happening, I started getting all these health problems. I started having trouble sleeping. I developed sleep apnea. Little by little, my back and I had wear and tear from, the job I had in the Army was very physical. I was doing a lot of parachuting. I was a ranger, and it was very physical. And all of a sudden, this covert abuse, you don't know it's happening, and it starts to really, you develop all these chronic health problems. And I went into the VA. There's the VA hospital. I went in there and I said, I don't know what's happening. I said I'm having headaches. I'm not sleeping. They did a test, so you have sleep apnea, and my back got bad. I started gaining weight, and all this stuff started happening. And the VA attributed it to the military, and I had no clue. I developed gastrointestinal problems. I was hospitalized for a week because my stomach became ill. And I had no clue why. I had no clue. I literally had no clue why. And the thing is, at the time, the VA said, look, maybe it was probably from trauma from the military. And, PTSD is something when you have PTSD, it's from a specific event. So let's say I had post-traumatic stress from being blown up, per se. You relive that experience. You have intrusive thoughts. You avoid, talking about it. You avoid, scenarios that you have the same, sights or sounds that will elicit some, a negative response. You avoid all that. I never had that. I never had any intrusive thoughts of war. I never had nightmares. People have that stuff. That shit's real. I never had that. But I was having tremendously, complex health problems, chronic health problems, and the Army did not know why. And they basically said, this is probably from wear and tear and from trauma from the Army. And I was like, okay, and I was going to therapy and doing all this stuff. Little by little, the woman was gaslighting me. So the woman was starting to abuse me. And then when it was affecting me, she started associating it with the military and saying, if I would get a fever and my stomach gets sick from her stonewalling me, it's because, you have to process your trauma from the Army. So this is a gaslighting. And at the time, you being a normal range person, you want to address your own problems. You want to take control of it and say, okay, I want to know what my health problems are. I want to solve it. I want to go to therapy, and I want to process all this, and I want to be, so you go through all of that. And this is what the gaslighting leads into this stuff. And, basically in 2016, I started having all these health problems. Like I said, my back was getting bad. The Army basically said, hey, we can reclassify you to give you an administrative position. And they said, you've done 10 years of service. You have a few injuries. We can basically give you a medical retirement package. And so at the time I was, I really liked the Army. I got to accomplish so much in it, and I wanted to stay in the service. And this woman, I kind of started incorporating her in these decisions, and she talked me into building up my retirement package. And so in 2016, it's worth noting that we were not even living together yet. This woman was going out on lunch breaks, taking pictures of expensive wedding rings on her ring finger, and sending me the pictures. So this is, the intermittent reinforcement where she's abusing me and my health is deteriorating. And I don't understand it. But she's sending me pictures, trying to suck me into proposing to her. So, so this is what was happening. Going into 2017, I ended up getting, medical benefits and a little pension package from the Army. And this woman, knowing that, talked me into marrying her a month before leaving the service. Okay? So it was a month before leaving the service, and she talked me into marrying her. And I wanted a full wedding. I wanted a family to be there, all this. They weren't able to at the time. And so this woman said, we'll have a real wedding one day. And, she talked me into having just this courthouse wedding. And at the time, I just agreed to it, thinking, well, again, going into the relationship, I really want to get married. I want a family, a wife, spouse to take care of. I want children. And so, she kind of preyed on that, and she talked me into getting married 1 month before I left the Army in 2017, and we had a courthouse wedding. A month later, she had me download an app to time when I was to impregnate her. And at the time I said, I want to finish grad school. I left the Army. I got this like consulting gig with like this like international NGO for like a year. And I was doing really well. Right when I left the Army, I was doing this consulting gig, and I was finishing my graduate program. And I said, I want to, to slow down and let's finish my graduate program and let me, I want to buy a house and all this stuff, the American dream, and this woman kind of, would cry and would say, oh, I really want to have a kid, and I really am ready to have a child now and all this stuff. And so again, kind of playing on sympathies and playing on, what my I was passionate about. And so again, you interpret as, oh wow, this person really loves me. This person was, really loves me, that they're pushing me into this. And so, I downloaded the app a month after marriage. This woman was, pregnant. And so, I was excited. I'm married. I just left a 10-year career in the Army. I have a great job. I'm finishing my master's degree. And so I was doing very well. And little by little, I started seeing more abusive behavior while this woman was pregnant. And then I was trying to go to marriage counseling with her. I started seeing certain behaviors I was concerned of. And I remember at one point I was, driving over a bridge to take her to a park to get exercise. And I started crying. And I said, you have no respect for me. And I said, I'm afraid that when our daughter's born, you're not going to respect me, and won't respect your father. And I was crying, and the woman, would get fits of narcissistic rage. Anytime you try and talk about, any of your emotions or any of your normal range concerns, in a relationship, you want to allow yourself to be vulnerable. You want to do that. That's normal. That's healthy. That does not make you codependent. That makes you normal to want to allow yourself to be vulnerable to someone, to want to open up to them. And you want to do that when you think, oh, I'm giving unconditional love to someone. You want them to provide you reassurance. That's normal. That's not codependence. That's a normal reaction. That's a normal behavior. This woman preys on those things, so the things that, I would talk to her about, when, you're vulnerable, they kind of save that to weaponize it against you, later on when they engage in, smear campaigning. So like this was happening. I was trying to address these abusive behaviors, again, continually trying to set up boundaries. And we ended up going to a marriage counselor while she was, pregnant. And I found myself in the marriage counselor, wanting to, again, you go into the marriage, a big thing, I started reading lots of marriage books and parenting books, and I'm a big fan of John Gottman, and he's a really good doctor. He's
of the Gottman method.
Right, yeah. So he has, the 4 horsemen of, John Gottman's great. The 4 horsemen of, he can predict, he has a 95% accuracy rate, for predicting divorce. And he calls these 4 horsemen, it's like the 4 signs of a divorce. And all of them are narcissistic abuse behaviors. And so, like, I started reading all this John Gottman stuff, trying to, John Gottman says you don't attack each other, you attack the problem. So as a normal range person, you go into these abuse things, and you don't know it's fucking abuse. You don't know it's abuse. And you go into this stuff, and you're trying to solve this riddle. And so I was going into marriage counseling saying, I can do this better. I can do that better. I can, I want to improve this in my. So you go and saying these self-reflective, self-aware statements in the abuser, and saying, yes, you need to do that better. You need to improve that. That upsets me. You need to do this and that. And so that's a dynamic that I saw happening. And so the marriage counselor and this is something everyone should know. These people will get it wrong. The marriage counselor, not understanding of be able to see narcissistic abuse, he started treating my responses to being abused. So the marriage counselor started addressing how I was responding to being abused. And that's toxic. That's toxic. Everyone needs to know that that's toxic. When you're in an abusive relationship, there is not 2 abusers. There is an abuser and there is a victim. There is no 2 abusers. And this type of narcissistic abuse, this is not a he said, she said, in no way. Marriage counselors will think so. Your family who doesn't understand will think so. Courts and judges and attorneys, and they will all think so, but it's not the case. In an abusive relationship, there's an abuser and there's a victim. And so these people engage in something called reactive abuse. So as I mentioned to you in the beginning, this one would stonewall, and I would send these emotionally dysregulated texts and emails trying to elicit some responses to her. She saved all that. And so she started showing it off to everyone, like saying, look at him, he's unstable, everyone. He's unstable. And this is called reactive abuse. You know, these people recorded responses to being abused, and then they feign victimhood. So another big, you know, pattern behavior of these sociopaths is they turned themselves into the victim. And this woman was an expert at it. I mean, her career, she worked in a high-paying sales position. You know, when I met her, she would wear, you know, $1,000 dresses and expensive high heels. And so this was her character. She was a salesperson. She knows how to manipulate, and this is why in some ways these people end up successful in these positions. So this is inherent in her character. And so, you know, I was dealing with that, and it was very overpowering. And in the marriage counseling, you know, I found that the marriage therapist was not getting it. And again, at that time, 2018 now we're in, this woman, you know, again, narcissistic abuse was not in my vocabulary. I did not really understand what was happening. And so I really was exhausting myself trying to educate myself. So I mentioned I started reading all these books and getting all these resources and doing the legwork. And that's a big thing for abuse recovery. Like, you can talk to a therapist and all of this and that, but you have to really find power from yourself. And that goes through, you know, especially in initial stages, validation's huge. And so educating yourself on these behaviors is vital. And I found myself doing that because, honestly, these abusive behaviors are so damaging. You never want it to happen again. You literally never want it to happen again. So you want to educate yourself so much that you can see a sociopath, you know, a mile away.
So you're going through all of that. Your self-esteem has taken most likely a huge dive at this point. You probably think you're crazy. No one is validating you. What is, I guess, the first resource? Is it somewhere near this timeline where you read something and you go to yourself, that's what I'm dealing with?
Yes. So that, I did not find that aha moment until after my daughter was born. So
okay.
So while this woman was expecting, we were now living together. We were married. This woman's in her second trimester, going into her third trimester. Some weird things started happening. And that's going to lead into my aha moment. So now in 2018, we're living together in marriage. She's pregnant with my daughter. My daughter, thank God, is going along healthy. And you know, I have a pregnant wife at home. I would do anything. Again, me being a normal range person with empathy, I would do anything for her. I think I married her. I said wedding vows. You know, I was very intentional on that. And, you know, I give her unconditional love. If something's wrong with her,
it sounds like a song that by a guy from New Jersey. Maybe your other boyfriends couldn't pass the test. Well, if you're rough and ready for love, honey, I'm tougher than the rest. Do you know that song?
Yes, I do. Yeah. I mean,
thank you, Bruce. You know, I had to throw that in there. I'm sorry.
You know, that's the thing. This stuff is really, you know, it's tricky because you really exhaust yourself emotionally, and you realize, like, everything you thought was there, you know, it's a complete illusion what you're really doing with, you know. And so, exactly, in 2018, I was really going out of my way to, you know, try and fix this stuff and try and, you know, get everything together. This one was pregnant. She was worrying about losing her job, okay? And so one of the benefits in the Army is called this. They have these benefits for it's called like a caregiver program. And basically, this woman knew I got blown up, you know, over a decade ago, and it was never on my military record or anything like that. And this is a year after the Army now. This woman was pushing me. She was saying, I'm going to lose my job. And at the time, I was paying all the bills, paying all the utilities. This is financial abuse, by the way. At the time, this woman was saying she didn't have money. I was paying all the bills. I was paying all the, you know, all the utilities. I was, you know, working, doing all the work, you know, in school, kind of, you know, keeping the roof up. And this woman played on my system. Lose my job, you need money, and, you know, you need to go and get a concussion put on your military medical record to get us this benefit, because this benefit would give a spouse like thousands of dollars a month. And so so what I'm trying to get into is this woman was pushing me to commit federal health care fraud. Okay, this is like serious stuff. This woman pushed me to lie to the VA. So a month before my daughter was born, this woman had me write a 2-page letter, and I sent to the VA, basically just tarnishing my name, saying, oh, he's a veteran, he can't get out of bed, and I have to take care of him and all this stuff. And at the time, I have a pregnant wife who's crying to me, telling me she's going to lose her job, and she's like manic, and it's like, this manic behavior that you can't pin down. And it's like I sacrificed myself. Again, I lost all boundaries, thinking, oh, what I'm doing it may not be ethically right, but it's morally right because I'm protecting my spouse. I'm protecting my, unborn daughter. And so I lied to the VA. I sent this 2-page letter to them saying, I have to take care of my spouse, I'm Mrs. So-and-so. And, a few months later, they sent me a letter saying, oh, yeah, you have, we approve your, your report of, having, brain injuries, traumatic brain injuries. And so, mind you, at the time, I was literally getting published. I was working a consulting gig. I finished my master's degree in a top 5 program in the country. And at the time, I was applying to law schools. I got into about 20 law schools. There's a category called the T14 law schools. They're like the top 14 law schools in the country. I got into 2 of them. I mean, I was scheduled to basically start law school at the time my daughter was going to be born. So think of that in comparison to me sending a letter saying that I can't get out of bed and because I got blown up a decade ago and I have a brain injury. This is how these people, you see, these sociopaths, they know that at some point, based off of their repetition of relationships, they know that at some point they're going to lose you. So they will do everything they can to suck all of the resources out of you. And this is a narcissistic supply. And it goes into, when you're looking at this type of behavior, someone to push you to commit a crime, and we're skirting the area of criminality. This is Machiavellian. This is what they call the dark triad. This is sadistic. This is the behavior when they're not just doing things impulsively, based off of, their own false self. They are doing things strategically, and they're now strategizing ways to solely benefit themselves. And this is when you get into the far end of the spectrum, of this type of these types of abusive people, these sociopaths. So that's where I found myself. And once that happened, again, a month later, my daughter was born. I got into law school. Literally the night my daughter was born, I started law school the next day. I was working at a nonprofit as a financial analyst at that time now. So I was working full time. I got into law school, an evening program, and I'm a new father. I mean, I'm just, all of that in itself is an accomplishment. I was doing all of this. And this woman was just constantly taking more and more. When my daughter was born, this woman was talking, she started having suicidal thoughts, saying she wanted to kill herself, kill my daughter. And my sister, she works in women's health. She believed that this woman had some sort of postpartum psychosis because this woman would confide into me this stuff. And so I didn't, again, I was sacrificing my integrity to thinking I'm protecting this woman. You feel, she's ill. I have to, help her more, and I have to sleep less and work more and pay more bills. And, it's like you start just exhausting yourself to where you lose your sense of self. You lose all boundaries because they incorporate you in everything, and you're already isolated. At this time, I was isolated from my family and friends, from my support group, and so this happened. My daughter was born. I got paternity leave. My law school was really good. They let me miss the first 6 weeks of lectures, and it was, really, considerate. And I was literally up day and night with my daughter doing all the parenting, all the stuff that normally a woman would do as a mother, I was doing, as a guy. And I wasn't upset about it. I was happy about it. But this woman basically had no empathy. And so after a few months, she ended up getting on, after about a month of that, when my daughter was born, she ended up getting on psychiatric medication, and literally 2 or 3 months after that, this woman was returned a bit to her previous, it seemed like normalcy, to her to her previous self, and she returned to having no empathy. And so I was literally I was sleeping 3 hours a night, literally working, and I was missing 1 day a week from work and missing school just to stay home and care for my daughter. And basically, I was sleeping on the couch I had my daughter's crib in the couch with my head, next to my daughter's crib. This woman would be in the room with the door closed, loaded on Xanax and Zoloft, sleeping and getting her 10 hours of beauty sleep. And I thought, I'm being a good husband, And so I would see her, and I would look for normal range emotional support, like a pat on the back, something like this. And she would just say, "Oh, you're emoting. You're emoting. You're emoting." And when she started doing this, she started running off to another state, 2 states away, where her mother was staying. So this woman, when my daughter was born, this woman started having problems with the parenting, just couldn't figure it out. And she started resigning herself. And in my absence, this woman's family members were handling my daughter. And so lots of issues started happening with that I was trying to address. My daughter was not being handled properly. I found my daughter with a blanket almost covering her face. This was she was a week old. She wasn't strong enough to push the blanket off. And she could have died with something called SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. And this is how it happens. I found my daughter in bad condition, not being taken care of. She wasn't being fed properly, handled. She was being isolated in the room. And so little behaviors started happening like this. And after about 2 or 3 months of, after my daughter's birth, this woman was engaging in, again, no empathy, absolutely no empathy. And then she started doing something called enmeshment. And enmeshment is when she starts incorporating my daughter into her delusion. And so she would say stuff like, "Oh, I won't say my daughter's name, but she'll say, me and our daughter, your daughter don't need to deal with your emoting. Me and our daughter don't need to deal with your sensitivity. Me and our daughter." So this is them starting to incorporate other people, and this is a form of triangulation, and this is how parental alienation happens. And so my aha moment after this was happening, I ended up leaving my job, and I was in law school, and I was working as a clerk part-time, so I was able to be home more for my daughter, and I was trying to address these issues. And the woman, anytime she, again, if you remember in 2015-16, whenever I would try and set a boundary or address an issue together as as a couple, she would engage in stonewalling. She started doing that with my daughter. So once my daughter was born, she's an infant, I was trying to incorporate this woman and parent with her together and set up boundaries and healthy behaviors. And she would run off to another state to hide at her mother's house, and she would withhold my daughter from me. So she started using my daughter as an object, as a weapon to hurt me. Okay, and this is a common behavior now. This is a pattern behavior that lots of sociopaths do. And the reason is everything around them, is an object. They're not really that, with empathy, there's 2 types of empathy. There's cognitive empathy, where you're aware of others' empathy, and then there's the second type of empathy. I'm forgetting the term for it. But the second type of empathy is you being able to feel the other person's emotions. Okay, and so these people have cognitive empathy where they can see that you have emotion and they can prey on that, but they don't have, it's called affective empathy. They don't have effective empathy where they actually can see that they're hurting you. They can see that they're doing damage. So that's the thing is when people hear these complex, scenarios of narcissistic abuse, it's hard for people to really grasp because it's easy to, people project normal psyches onto these people, okay? They project normal psyches. So you think no one can be that evil. No one can be that toxic. No one can be that hurtful and abusive. But they don't get, these people, it's not that they're masterminds of all this. It's that their brains are impaired. They literally don't have empathy. They don't have a conscience. So they do things that hurt people, and they're not aware of it. And everything is about them. And so I started seeing the same abuse patterns. Once my daughter was born, I started seeing these big flags, and I said, I know that behavior. That's withholding. That's stonewalling. That's isolating. And I started seeing all this stuff and how she was incorporating my daughter and treating her as an object. And I said, that's how I've been treated. This one's and so little by little this was happening. And in May, and now we're in 2019, I literally was having final exams for law school, and I was having a job interview to get this job for a summer position as a clerk, and I was doing really well. And right at that moment, the woman just disappeared and took my daughter for no reason at all. Literally and so that's another behavior is, now I went through a lot of narcissistic abuse support groups, and you will hear people say that these people engage in this abusive behavior when you're the most vulnerable. When when you learn of your parent getting cancer, or when, or when you have the pneumonia, or when they engage in this behavior. And so I found this happening to me. And so in May of 2019, I was in final exams. I was getting ready, doing this job interview. My daughter was 9 months old. I had no idea where she was. I was calling this woman, texting her, emailing her. I couldn't find her. At that point, I lost 30 pounds in a month, and I was hospitalized for mild stroke. I had no clue where my infant daughter was. And every time, in my absence, I saw my daughter being mishandled, neglected, abused. And I literally was hospitalized. And so it was bizarre. And, in May 2019, I went and I drove to the other state to get my daughter, to finally recover her. And I went in there and this woman was nowhere to be found. I found my daughter in a playpen next to a cat litter box. Literally, my brain exploded. That's so toxic to inhale. My daughter ended up getting an upper respiratory infection. And so I went in and I saw my daughter with all these rashes over her, and she had, her diaper was wet, and she had cat hair all over her, and she was next to this cat litter box, and it broke my heart. And and this woman was nowhere to be found. And so I got my daughter, and I was getting her stuff ready to bring her back home, to bring her back home. And then this woman's mother called the cops on me. And the cops come in, there I have an infant daughter in my arm. The cops arrive, and this woman's mother says to them, "Oh, it's been said, that he's an unstable war veteran. It's been said." No one's ever said that. It's been said. That was the word she said. So the cops came up to me and talked to me. And they let me go. They did not ask for any ID or anything. And so at that moment, this woman's mother told the woman what happened. This woman called my entire support group. I'm talking my doctor my primary care doctor, my best friend, my mother, my sister. And this is what they do is this is a pattern of behavior is they start to, basically they start to triangulate on you, and they start to incorporate other people. And they start, basically smearing you. And this is this term flying monkeys, They use these people, they use these enablers. And these people don't get it because, again, you just can't get that this person, could be so toxic. You just don't really get it. And this woman was starting to tell people all of this false narrative, basically. And so systematically she called everyone. And then I got home, brought my daughter home. And basically, this woman was here. I had my mother come with me. This woman was here at our house when I finally got my daughter home. And this woman was curled up on the couch in a ball. And I was, it was just manic. Again, manic, so big ups and downs. Either this woman has no empathy or she goes to emotional extremes when interpreting the most minute, the most minor slights against her. And this is because these people. Sociopaths set unrealistic expectations. So one of the things is when they idealize you, it's because they have this unrealistic expectation of who they are. And when they see you're just a normal person, they devalue you. And they have this unrealistic expectation of who they are. And they can't live up to it. And so instead of addressing their false self, they have to make themselves a victim and say everything around them is the problem. That's pathological, And so this is the types of behavior this woman was doing, and when I saw her, she would have these big manic swings, and I didn't know what to attribute it to. Again, I was still learning. And that night, she we were home, and I was again trying to talk to her. "Oh, I'm your husband. I'm going to help you," and this and that, thinking we're going to help them. And she was saying, "Oh, I don't feel good. I haven't taken my medication in a long time." And so this, and I said, "What's going on?" She said, "Oh, I don't feel good. I have headaches. I haven't taken my medication in about a week." And so this woman, was supposed to take medication. I later found out that they were prescribing her, medication for antidepressants. And not only was she was supposed to take one supply, 30-day supply each month. She wasn't refilling the supplies until 6-7 weeks later. And then every 2 months, they're doubling the dosage. So so even when these people go to get help, it's not what you think, and you can try and help them, but they're not being treated for what's really wrong with them. They'll be treated for depression. It's very rare that these people actually get diagnosed with this cluster B stuff. It's very rare. And so, so this woman, I believe that the medication probably hurt her more. And so the next day, she had a manic episode. And, her mother was basically saying to her, she woke up saying, oh, I don't feel good, and I don't know what's going on. I can't control myself. And it's just really just really disordered behavior and really manic. And at the same time, her mother's texting her saying, oh, just leave him, move to another state. So there's this weird, emotional incest that's happening between this woman and her mother and my daughter. And again, this woman resigned herself. So her mother's thinking she has full reign over my daughter, right? And so I see this sociopath behavior now from kind of her mother. And so you kind of pick up on this stuff. You see this pattern behavior, of treating my daughter like an object. And I was trying to set boundaries, and after that, in May, when this woman came back the next day, she once again kidnapped my daughter. At that time, she was, manic, and I was feeding my daughter, and I went to get my daughter a bib, and I went in the other room. This is right after I recovered her from the cat litter box the next day. This woman's home. Let me try to regroup here. This woman's home. We're home. I'm trying to feed my daughter, trying to establish some normalcy. And I went into the other room, and I look, and I get my daughter's bib to feed her. I come back. Both my front doors are open. My daughter's not in her high chair. I look. It's pouring rain outside. I go outside. The woman's running down the street. It's pouring rain. She's in flip-flops and pajamas, and she's got my daughter in her arm. And I said, what the fuck? I said, what is going on? So I got outside. I ran around the corner. I stood in front of her. I said, stop. Give me our daughter. I very gently and carefully picked up my daughter from this woman's arms. This woman starts screaming at the top of her lungs, help, he's kidnapping my baby. Help, he's kidnapping my baby. And it's pouring rain. My daughter starts crying. The construction workers out at the corner start walking up thinking, I'm doing something. And I'm explaining to them, no, it's okay, guys. I live right here. My house is there. Everything's okay. And I get in the house, and this woman, 1 minute, is crying hysterically. Once I get my daughter in the house, this woman literally, like a light switch, stops crying. And so you'll see this with these people. They have these crocodile tears. And this plays into, they get this weird look in their eyes. Their eyes get really wide open. And it's like an inhuman look. And I've met other people who've experienced this. They get this weird sociopath look in their eyes. And so this was happening. This woman calls 911 and says, help, my husband is an unstable war veteran. Okay? So the cops come and they say, and I talk to them, and I said, what's going on? I said, this woman's manic. I said, she's not well. I think she had psychosis. I said, I don't know what's going on. She's been struggling as a parent. I said, she's bouncing off the walls. And I said, she's not taking medication. And they said, oh, well, we have to take you. It's mandatory to take you to the VA to get you treated, to make sure you're okay. And I said, really? They said, yeah, we have to. It's protocol. I said, okay. They took me 3 blocks away to the VA, and an hour later the VA released me. And when I got home, my daughter was kidnapped once again. That was at the time that I went into shock. I was at final exams in law school. I lost 30 pounds. I ended up being hospitalized for a mild stroke. I mean, I could have woke up with half my face paralyzed. This is how severe narcissistic abuse is. It sounds just like, you can talk about it normally, but it's severely traumatizing. It's severely traumatizing. And I went through that, and I had no clue what was happening. And that's when I started. This is my aha moment. That was a long tangent. These payments are a sign of trauma. I'm aware of that. But that was my long tangent. So at this time now, it's June 2019. I started Googling this woman's behavior as a parent. And I read all the books, all the marriage books, all the parenting books. I had a marriage counselor. I had my own therapist. I could not figure out what was happening. I started Googling this stuff, and I found these words, parental alienation, and I actually found a doctor in California. His name's Craig Childress, and he worked a lot with foster children. He's in California. He's a big advocate for parental to help children of parents of parental alienation, and he's unique because he ties parental alienation to cluster B. He ties it to narcissistic abuse, I found out by going backwards. I was researching her parental behavior with my daughter, how she objectified my daughter, used her as a weapon. And then I found this parental alienation stuff by this guy, Craig Childress. And then I started saying, oh, narcissist personality disorder. What is that? And then I remember the first 3 months of dating her, I called her, a narcissist. And then I start reading about, borderline, antisocials, and all this sociopath stuff. And when I read that, when I started finding that and finding this literature online, this woman named Shahida Arabi. She is a best-selling author of narcissistic abuse and has these articles. I found a doctor named Sherry Steins in California. She's really good. She has a psychology of abuse newsletter, and she has all of this literature about narcissistic abuse, all these articles published. And I started digging and I started finding stuff. And when I read this stuff, it was a glass slipper. Like when you talk about projection and projective identification and the gaslighting and learning all this lingo, it is not pop psychology. This stuff is real. This is severely damaging abuse. And so I started learning all this stuff. And when I read all of this and it was like all the lights in the room were turned on. It was like all the lights in the room were turned on. I knew I was like, yes, this is not chaos. This is patterned. There's words for this, and you're learning the words and you're educating yourself. And you started getting validation because, again, being a normal person, you're blaming yourself, thinking, oh, what did I do wrong? I didn't care for her enough. I should have slept less and I should have did more and given more, and it's like, no, you're getting abused, So that was my aha moment. And in July, a month later, this woman came back, acted like nothing ever happened. And I was starting to get educated. This is June 2019. I started getting educated on all this stuff, and little by little. And again, I was trying to support this woman and help her. And I was still learning all this lingo and learning all this stuff. And July came, and one night my daughter was in her crib. And, again, every night I would put my daughter to sleep. And after she goes to sleep, I would do the dishes. I would, I wouldn't take a shower till midnight. I was making my daughter's lunch for the next day. I did all the parenting stuff. And it's sad. It's sad because these people, the sociopaths, they're not capable of loving their own children. They're just not capable. And when you love someone and you give unconditional love and you think you're going to get it back, they're just not capable. They have an impairment of empathy. They don't have empathy. They don't have a conscience. And so it's extremely, it's profound. These people are just incapable of loving their own children. And so at this time, my daughter in July was crying in her crib, and this woman, again, jumped up out of the bed. I was changing or something. This woman went into my daughter's room. I looked down the hallway, and this woman, my daughter was 9 months old, learning how to stand up in the crib, and she was holding onto the rail crying. She probably just wanted to be comforted or have a bottle. This woman grabbed her by the arm, started shaking her, pushing her down in the bed and screaming at her. No, lay down. I said lay down. All the babies are sleeping. Lay down now. And I went in and I said, stop. And I pulled her out of the room and I said, we already talked about this. You're not going to yell at her. And it's odd because this woman, when my daughter was, throughout the stages of my daughter's tertiary life, I was encouraging this woman to go out and go out to brunch with her friends and talk to, bring my daughter, trying to think, oh, she's going to get some skin in the game as a parent, And one of the pattern behaviors is these people go out and they put on this grand show of being a parent. So she would go out and she would put on this big show of her being a parent with this, with my daughter. But then when she came home, she was hands off. Literally, she would physically push my daughter away from her. She was so hands off. So it's just bizarre because this feeds into, these people put on this illusion. These people put on this type of behavior to deceive others, to make themselves, appear a certain way. And this was happening, and at this time, this woman, at that night in July, this woman assaulted my daughter. I got her out the room. The next day, I woke up really early. I had to get a haircut. I haven't gotten a haircut in like a month. And I'm like scared. I'm like, if I'm going to leave this woman, I hope she doesn't kidnap my daughter again. So sure enough, I went to get a haircut at 7 a.m. I come back. This woman's gone. My daughter's gone. I didn't know what to do. I called the cops, and the cops come to the house, and I said, I don't know what to do. I said, this woman, I said, I don't know what's wrong with her. There's something wrong. I don't know what it is. And she took my daughter, and I, showed them all this stuff. And at the time, a month prior, I forgot to mention, when my daughter was taken a month prior, this woman and her mother were drugging my daughter up with Benadryl. I found I had to confiscate a bottle of Benadryl. They were literally drugging her up to put her to sleep. And so this is tremendously damaging for an infant child in the brain. Like, this is not, it's Benadryl you can give certain instances for allergies and things, but they were literally drugging her up. They went through half a bottle of children's Benadryl in a week to put her down. So my daughter's, again, not in her home. My daughter at this time, the first year of her life, my own mother only saw my daughter once. This woman was isolating my daughter from, just like she isolated me from my friends and family, she slowly started isolating my daughter from 50% of her family. And so this is the control, this is the abuse cycle that starts and is slow and steady with children from these people. And so July, when she assaulted my daughter, I called the cops and I explained to them, I have this bottle of Benadryl and this woman's not taking her meds and, something's wrong, And the cops did not even want to write a police report. And again, this is difficult because I mentioned in the beginning, I'm a guy, and it's kind of hard to speak on abuse. It's almost, it's again, it's like, from what I understand, there's no male domestic violence shelters or anything like that. Like, I know that it's, historically there's lots of violence and domestic violence with women, but it exists with men, and it's something that has to be heard. And I'm an advocate for any man or woman who experiences any kind of violence. And as a man, as a guy, maybe an alpha male even from the Army and all this, to experience abuse and to not know how to address it or have the resources, and to be and to go into marriage counseling and try to talk about it, and then they're blaming you for your response to being abused. That's called secondary gaslighting, and this will happen to people. This is very common. You'll experience this in court and counseling with therapists and by your own family members. And this is what I was really confronted with. And the cops did not even I had to talk them into writing a police report. I said, what do I do? And they said, call Child Services. The Child Services came here, and 3 hours later, and I walked through the whole house. They check everything, the fridge. I explained to them everything that happened. And they said, if you see her, call 911. For the next week, police and Child Services were trying to call this woman and her mother. They were calling her from my phone, from their phones. They left voicemails. This woman did not respond. They were about to do an Amber Alert for my daughter. They were about to do an Amber Alert, and then this woman sues me in Pennsylvania, sues me in another state, lying, saying that this woman sues me in another state a week later, saying that her and my daughter live in this other state, and that, she is a victim of domestic violence, and I assaulted her and my daughter. And it's just at the forefront. What person assaults their spouse and child and then calls the cops on themselves? That doesn't make any sense. That's illogical. And then calls Child Services on themselves and hands the phone to the law enforcement and Child Services. Please call anyone in my phone. Call them. It just shows you, these people will use the court and legal system to abuse you. And there's actually a really good book that I'm reading now. It's called Legal Abuse Syndrome, and it's by Dr. Catherine Huffer. And if anyone's dealing with the legal system and these sociopaths use the legal system as platforms to abuse, if you're dealing with that and you're being re-traumatized from, just courts that completely get it wrong, this book is a really good book. It's called Legal Abuse Syndrome, and that's helped me. So a lot of the stuff. So this is what this woman did. Literally, she assaulted my daughter. A week later, sued me for child abuse. And so I had to file all these lawsuits. I had to get attorneys and to file lawsuits in this other state because she filed frivolous lawsuits, with no proof of evidence, nothing, and lying in her court motions. And the court motions are just basically hysterical. And what you'll see is a lot of these people, They use smear. This is when I started one big pattern behavior of smear campaigning. So this woman basically starts smear campaigning, and she starts using persuasive rhetoric to influence people. And so you have a bunch of, other podcasts where people talk about this happening in court. And they smear you, and this is their way of discrediting you. And so they'll use kernels of truth that they have against you, and it'll sound believable. But they'll just use this stuff to kind of portray you as the unstable one. And so this woman was doing that, and her proof was, again, all these 5 texts and emails over the course of 5 years that she saved, put aside, from when she was abusive, and I was responding to the abuse. She saved those text and emails, and she's presenting them to the court, saying, "Look at him, everyone. He's a war veteran and he's unstable. Look at these texts and emails." Right? And so this is the crazy making stuff that they do, and the court buys into it. They use, this woman, is relying on stigma and bias and has no proof of anything. And this is what she started doing. And basically, I ended up having to file a lawsuit in the state I live for emergency custody and divorce to stop these lawsuits in another state, to get them thrown out. And so that's where I'm at now. And now there's a forensic psychologist involved doing an investigation. And it's really tricky because, these people, are manipulative. Like when you go through it and you have the experience with them as a parent or as a spouse, you know how powerful their manipulation is. You know it. You've experienced it. It's in their character. It's and so it's scary because the courts get it wrong, and these people will get it wrong. And, it's hard and it's difficult, and there's a lot of invalidation. And so, I'm at a point now, I'm a year out from this stuff, and this investigation's coming to a close soon, and, this divorce will be done, and my daughter's, custody will hopefully, she'll be returned to me. And basically, and it's tough because you can't, explaining all this in court, you sound like the crazy person. And it's like, and it's funny because I don't have an attorney. The whole time I was with this woman, I mentioned she financially abused me. When I filed for divorce, I had to subpoena her bank records. This woman saved up over $200,000 while she was with me. I had no clue. So this woman right now has retained 3 law firms across 2 states. These attorneys cost upwards of $1,000 an hour. They're completely toxic. And so I have no attorney. I'm doing all this on my own. I ended up having to drop out of law school, and I had to leave my job, and I'm now in the process of starting a new job. And all of this, and this is just so destructive. I mean, this woman, I lost my health. I lost, my job. I lost my financial stability. I lost my career. I lost my education. You literally lose everything. And it's scary. I forgot to mention one detail that this happened in June 2019 time when I met this woman right before I went into the hospital for a mild stroke. I met this woman at a restaurant to try and talk to her because she wasn't telling me where my daughter was. And I was trying to tell her, her behavior's affecting me physically. I'm having health problems. I was having trouble typing. My lips were numb. It was weird stuff, and I had this chest pains. And I was trying to tell her this, and when I said, hey, I want to tell you something about my health. It's really serious. This woman looked, and her lips pursed up in a smile, and she had this exhilarating look on her. She said, "Are you going to commit suicide?" And she said that to me. And this is when you're in, again, you're in this area of sadistic stuff. You're in this area of extremely toxic behavior. These people, there's they're very disordered. And this woman was exhilarated. I mean, there's scientific studies, these types of people, when you look at frowns, a part of your brain that's, gets sadness, gets stimulated. These types of people, they look at frowns and the happy part of the brain gets stimulated. This is a scientific study. So this is what you're kind of dealing with. And when I saw that, I broke down in tears. They said, what? Suicide? I said, no. I said, I said, and I was trying to explain to her, little did I know, they said I could have had a mild stroke in my sleep. And it's this is what happens. And so it's very dangerous because these people, the reason that's so exhilarating to her, because it solidifies this alternate reality. These people's understanding of what's happening to them is closer to fantasy than reality. They live in delusions. And that's because they have a false self, and they will do anything to protect it. That includes having their spouse die. And that further fits into this narrative of them being a victim and their spouse being unstable and all this whole story. And that they will do anything to protect their false self. And this is exactly what was happening. And so now I'm in this courtroom battle, and this woman literally, when I went to a court date in the other state for the first court hearings for that, when she was trying to sue me there, I went in. I haven't seen her in 2 months. I have no idea where my daughter is. There's no formal custody order. I missed my daughter's 1-year-old birthday. Okay. I see this woman. It's 9 a.m. This woman's in a black mini skirt, bright red lipstick, hair done up, heels. I see her. I start shaking because I'm worried about her. I'm so worried about her and my daughter. When I saw her, I started shaking. When she saw me, she started smiling and lifted her head up. Mind you, this is the woman that begged me to marry her, begged me to impregnate her, and now a year later is filing, false allegations against me. She did everything but filed for divorce. When I talked to the attorneys in her other state, I said, "What does she want?" I tried to mediate and solve this. They said, "We don't know what she wants." So these people, a big pattern is they're impulsive. They do things and they constantly change their narratives to justify their impulsive behavior. And so this is this impulsive, destructive behavior in plain sight. When I finally filed a lawsuit in the home state where my daughter lives with where I live, when she came in there, this woman had no makeup, a black turtleneck, crocodile tears. She's a victim now. So this is a common thing with they call this the drama triangle, the Cartman drama triangle. These people will play the aggressor or the victim, and she's doing it with my daughter. In this sense, she's the savior parent, and I'm the quote unquote abusive parent. So this is the triangulation. This is the toxic stuff that happens with these people, and when they incorporate and mesh children into delusions. So now I'm trying to advocate for all this through court, and it's hard and it's exhausting. But I'm at a point where I've realized, these people. I met someone from an abuse group. So I go to some narcissistic abuse groups, and I recommend that if you're in the initial stages, do as much as you can to educate yourself. And with someone I met, we were talking, and there was a story that I thought that I'll share here because I really liked it. And he says, there's a proverb, but it's a bit loquacious, but I'll share it. There's a frog and a scorpion, and the scorpion the scorpion wants to cross this river. And he goes up to the frog, and he says, can I ride on your back? I want to cross this river. And the frog says to the scorpion, "No, I will not let you ride on my back. You're a scorpion. There's no way." And then the scorpion says, to the frog, why would I sting you? If I'm riding on your back across the water to get to the other side, if I sting you, we'll both die. And why would I do that? And the frog says, "Okay, you're right." So the frog lets the scorpion on his back, and the frog goes to swim across the water. And they're halfway through, and the scorpion stings him on the back. And the frog says, "Scorpion, why would you do that? I'm now surely going to die. We're both going to die." And the scorpion says, "I can't help it. I'm a scorpion. This is just what I do." And the point is, these people, they are not aware that they are hurting you. This is just embedded in their behavior. No matter what you do, these people will hurt you. They will hurt you. You can get, there's instances of there's a doctor named Sam Vaknin who's a narcissist, and he's highly published. He's developed something called cold therapy for sociopaths. Supposedly it's worked a little bit, but the truth is these people, they don't want help. Nothing will help them, and you can exhaust yourself to the point of losing everything in life, losing your health, your job, your finances, your child, and nothing will help. These people are disordered, and they have an impairment in their brains.
So yeah. How are you doing?
I'm at the point where I've went through with therapy and I've done support groups, and that helps. But, you have to really educate yourself. And something that's empowering is, knowing what's happening and having confidence in yourself. And so this is why things like this podcast is really reassuring. And now I'm starting a new career as a teacher next month. I'm really excited for that. It gives you some agency when you get to help others, when you're so when all your power's taken away from narcissistic abuse, to help others, it's empowering, and it gives you some agency. And like I'm doing that. I mean, yeah.
So have you mentally prepared yourself for the co-parenting or parallel parenting that you'll have to be doing after your divorce is finalized? And as far as that goes, as far as custody goes, have those terms been worked out yet, or anything along those lines?
Right. So that's the exact question that I'm facing right now is terms. How do I come to terms with the co-parenting? And the truth is, my daughter, she will have challenges when she's 5, 10, 15 years old. She will have challenges dealing with a high conflict sociopath parent. And when your children are 5, 10 years old, you can't tell them, hey, your mom's a sociopath. You can't say that. Like, it's natural for children to want to love both of their parents. That's natural. And you want to try and do that. But the truth is, with these people, it's just dangerous. They will do, when I was in a narcissistic abuse support group, you sit around, and there was adults who were married and have children of their own that were still there coping with the narcissistic abuse from their own mother from when they were 5 years old. And it's just like, and the behaviors they were describing was exactly the types of behaviors this woman was doing against my daughter. And so to see that, you see an extraordinary sense of urgency. But the truth is, so the truth is with this, there's one quote I like. It's like, the world doesn't make sense, and it says, the world is not going to make sense unless you force it to. And that's a quote by Batman. but the point is, like, you have to expect the courts are going to get it wrong. The attorneys are going to get it wrong. The psychologists.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Based upon the history of your soon-to-be ex-wife, thank goodness. She is someone who has told the world that you are abusive, and you are on the other side of that, and you're saying that she is. And as far as the court goes right now, do they believe her side of the story, number one? And number two, when it comes to this in the future, you have to be on the defensive to know now that this is what might be coming for me, that she might call again this out even after whatever happens. You get shared custody, and that she might call out that card, and then maybe one day have influenced your child so much that your child is doing the bidding for her. So is there ways that you've come across any way right now where maybe you do get children's services involved right away? So, it might not be the greatest, but to have someone there as proof, as a witness. So if your wife does say something, he did this, that there's someone there that is not your family member, but a witness to what has happened, because it's, it sounds like you need to protect yourself here, and not just protect yourself before this divorce ends, but after it is over, because the last thing you want is to never see your daughter again and have her use all of this collective misinformation that she's used already to technically kidnap her to another state and have zero repercussions. Because in most cases, when someone does that, they're in jail. And she has avoided that completely. So, going forward, is there a professional that you've looked up to how to combat this, if this is a possibility in the future, or is it something you've thought about?
Yeah, so I've done a few things, and I'll kind of go over it, and maybe some of these things will work for others. And so the first thing is, throughout the past year, there's been 2 child abuse investigations on this woman. 2. The first one I called in July when my daughter was assaulted in a crib. They looked for this woman for over a week. When they when they found her, she hid, and then sued me in Pennsylvania. I looked up the laws, and the laws in the other state, I'm sorry, and then the laws there say that if there's a child abuse incident, if you're protecting the child from domestic violence, that supersedes everything. So you're looking at sneezy lawyering from the very beginning. From the very beginning, these lawyers find out this woman has hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they're running around with bells on for her. Okay, and so they're telling her to lie in court records about her address. She's getting away with it. They're literally hammering me with lawsuits, and and it's just they're flooding the court, and it creates complete chaos. The court just does not have the attention span. So that's why I said you have to expect people to get it wrong. This woman, when I sued that first child abuse investigation, they closed it after just a few weeks, and they never even contacted me, the other parent. Why? Because they go, and she is a wealthy white woman with expensive clothes. I'm calling it as it is. This is the truth, and people know these child protective workers. They're overworked. They'll do whatever they can to get paperwork off their desk, and they screw up a lot. And a lot of this type of when there's narcissistic abuse on a child, it's hard to see because it takes place over a period of time. And me, as the normal range parent, I'm seeing it. A child protective worker is not going. They just don't have they don't have the tools to see that. So the first thing the first report they closed. After a few months, I said, I need to find a therapist. And I researched on websites therapists from narcissistic abuse, in my zip code. And I found a guy, and I started talking to him. And at this time, my daughter was going back and forth between these states. And I said, look, there's something, every time I get my daughter from this woman, my daughter's very lethargic. She has rashes all over her body. There's cuts and bruises on her back. She has stomach illness. She'll have like 4 or 5 bowel movements in 8 to 10 hours. There's full bowel, like not anything, it's full. And then I said, after 24 hours of being with me, I said her rashes are gone, her stomach's better, she's no longer lethargic, all this stuff. And I said, I don't know what they're doing to her. And I said, and it's scary because it's like this stuff, it's hard to document. So this narcissistic abuse on children is hard to document. So, and people just don't get it in the first place, let alone abuse on a child. So that's what I started communicating this to this therapist. He ended up filing a second report. These professionals have to do mandated reporting. He filed a second report, and he said, hey, I started trying to take pictures of my daughter's rashes and her bruises and all this weird stuff. I was trying to send him pictures, and I would send him updates. I just needed someone else to hear me, to know that this is happening. I tried the cops, I tried child services, no one got it. So I said, I just want someone else to know that this is happening. You're at that desperate point. He finally filed a report through mandated reporting. The second child abuse case, this woman hid for a week. They found her. They, again, saw her only one time. She's a wealthy white woman with nice clothes and all this. And, again, she's a manipulator. She worked in sales and all this stuff. And, again, without even contacting me at all, they closed the second case. So I'm standing in court saying there's been 2 child abuse investigations on this woman. I have proof that she abuses psychiatric medication. I'm not on any medication at all. I don't need medication. This woman's lying about marital assets, saying that all of this is, and I had to subpoena her bank records. The court just there's this ingrained systemic problems where, and in many cases it's justified, but in certain states when these issues happen, you immediately go to 50-50 with the child, and the state I'm in does not do that. So they just assume that since the child is so young, and this woman is, in fact, the woman gave birth, that she's the primary parent. When, if you remember, I gave you a bunch of examples. I can go another half hour more with this woman not doing any of the parenting, like literally pushing my daughter away. And so it breaks my heart to know that my daughter reaches and crawls and walks to me as her primary parent, and this woman just played no role. If the court is under the assumption that she's the female, the child is under 3 years old, this woman should just, take her however she pleases, and the father will ascertain his role in the child's life based off of a forensic psychologist investigation. And so it's like this woman's parental rights are, given until, proven otherwise, where mine have to be earned. And it's disorienting. And the truth is, that can go against this. Same stuff can happen to women too, who are on the other end in my shoes. And the truth is, if you have someone who's a sociopath, who's manipulative, and they have money, court is empowering. Court is an empowering thing for them. So I'm in a position now where, you know, I have to know that all of this stuff with the court and everything, these are short-term hurdles. I'm going to have to help my daughter for the rest of her life.
So my thing is, like they say to narcissistic abuse victims and survivors that you're supposed to journal. So in a way, your daughter cannot journal. So you're going to have to do the journaling for her. And as part of that journaling, you know, when she is in your care, and she's leaving your home to go to your ex-wife's home is something that is, I don't know what is right or what is wrong, but just like when you, I know I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this, but you know, when you go and get you're going to go rent a car. Before you rent that car, that rental company, for the most part, takes a picture of every part of that car before it's off the lot. So when they bring it back, they know exactly where the scratches are. They know exactly where it comes back and what is wrong. Yep. So is that some of the thing like, you know, to document what perfect shape your daughter is in before she leaves? So if she does come back and there is that, you can timestamp everything and be like, this is what's happening. And then over a period of time, you can show. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, if that's the right thing to do.
It is. It is. That's exactly what when I found this therapist, so anyone's dealing with this stuff, you know, share this with other people, because it took me some time to start journaling and documenting. I was like so overwhelmed with, you know, these people preemptively accuse you of the very things that they're doing. That's projection. And so the court doesn't get it, because the court projects a normal psyche onto these people, thinking, oh, you know, she's accusing him of the very behavior she's doing. It's a he said, she said. So the court just does not have the tools to distinguish this type of abuse. They don't have it. And it's sad. It's very sad. There's lawyers like you have Bill Eddy a lot on your website with all his resources. There's people like Bill Eddy, you know, are big advocates for this stuff, because the system is a bit behind. The courts are behind, the attorneys, you know, and the thing is with this type of behavior, the things that you know to deal with, like if you're outside of the courtroom, you know, there's lots of things that can help you deal with it. And one of them is, you know, no contact, right? Gray rock, right? That's a thing. And you know, you want to do that. And there's another thing called JADE. JADE is an acronym to remember how to be JADE with someone. When these people do things, they're trying to elicit any response, good or bad, that gives a narcissistic supply. And the term JADE stands for, you should not justify your behaviors. You should not argue them. You should not, what is it? Justify, argue. Now I'm forgetting my own acronym, but it stands for, justify, argue, defend, and explain. So when you're dealing with these people, when you do no contact, you do not want to fall in any traps. Don't feel like you need to justify yourself. Don't argue. Don't defend yourself from accusations, and don't explain yourself. You do not owe these people anything. And that's the way you have to find. These people will never give you closure, and so you have to find it in yourself. And the thing is, with children involved, you can't do that. It's hard, and you have to go limited contact. But even worse, in the court situation, courts encourage adversarial behavior. You know, the court system is developed to where they think these two parties come in, and through this adversarial litigation, somehow the truth will reveal itself in the courtroom. That's true for criminal cases or disputes with property, perhaps. But when you're dealing with the gray area of sociopaths and of child abuse, it doesn't work. And the court, does further damage, because it's so complicated, the court just doesn't have the bandwidth. So I'm in a position where, like, you kind of have to know that you have to stay strong through this, and you have to kind of expect these people to get it wrong. Expect the courts to get it wrong. Expect the forensic psychologist to get it wrong. Expect your neighbor. Expect your family to get it wrong. But know that you still have to stay strong, because if you have a child involved, they're going to need to lean on you. And you're going to have to give them the coping skills that you crafted, and to teach them at an early age how to deal with their own abusive parent. And so that's a big thing. And you cannot go to a 10-year-old and say, hey, your mom's a sociopath. Like you have to have the tools in your tool bag to help them to be the emotionally strong, normal range parent for them. And so I'm at a point where I'm expecting the courts to get it wrong. They're already getting it wrong. They're not understanding. I'm preparing for the forensic psychologist to make mistakes. But I know that there comes a day and my daughter will walk away on her own. My daughter will see and be conflicted with the things going on with her because it's an inevitable. And how much damage is done from now until then remains to be seen. But you have to be the parent that's willing to still stand for that, And that's why I say, you have to force the world. The world's not going to make sense. You have to force it to make sense because you have to stay strong and expect everything else to get weird around you, but you have to still stay consistent and know that you were abused. You're not wrong for reacting to abuse. It's okay that, this happened. It's okay that you allowed yourself to be vulnerable. That's normal. All this stuff, like commend yourself for these behaviors, for having empathy. Don't beat yourself up too much about, being quote unquote codependent or anything like that. Like there's lots of really good qualities. But the big thing is to educate yourself and really gain agency by starting to help others. And that's where I see this podcast playing. I'm starting to do volunteer work with equine therapy, like horse therapy, to help like other people, disabled children, veterans. They go through, they interact with horses here, and it's a form of therapy. And so I'm volunteering for that. So like, things you can do to kind of gain agency and be healthy, because it's very important to always return and get validation for this extremely disordered behavior you're dealing with. But it's important you don't want to ruminate. You want to continue to be yourself again. There's a guy I like, Jackson McKenzie. He wrote a really good book called Psychopath Free. And it's about narcissistic abuse. And he talks about this thing. And something I like, he says, when you're abused, you get through in the initial stages all about validation and educating yourself. And he's like, but after that, you have to know, like, you can be anything you want to be. You can do anything you want. And you can be yourself or be a totally new person again. And that's important because like me, I'm like, I used to play guitar. I'm returning to play guitar again. I used to play lots of sports. I'm returning to play basketball. With the pandemic, I can't. I'm returning, to play basketball and to go back into the gym. And you have to do that. And it's hard, especially when a child's involved and you have so much hands and noise, being brought in by these people. It's hard, but you have to look at this in the long term. There's in the Army, there's something called the Stockdale paradox. The Stockdale paradox. There was an Air Force officer named Officer Stockdale, and he was in the Vietnam War, and he was a prisoner in one of these prison camps. And they call this paradox. The Army calls it the Stockdale paradox. And what it is he survived this prison camp, and a lot of people didn't. And when they ask him what these people died from, he says they died of a broken heart. He says they died of a broken heart. And he says with the Stockdale paradox, he's like, you have to know, you have to find that higher power, that inner faith that you have to know that in the end, this is going to go your way, that there's God, whatever your higher power is, watching over you, watching over your children, in this situation with me. You have to really find affirmation in that. That's a constant, And he said these people had that, but they didn't have the second part. And the second part is, you have this. The first part is you have this faith in a higher power, knowing in the long term you're true, you're staying true, and you're right. But the second part is you still have to deal with the present reality. You still have to be able to deal with the present reality. You can't resign yourself and just say, "Oh, okay, this is going to happen. I'm going to put up." You still have to kind of stand up for yourself and be strong. You have to find that strength in the present. And so that's the Stockdale paradox. And I thought about that when I remember it applies to narcissistic abuse because you have to have that long-term awareness of, you're a good person. You're a good person. These people prey on you because you're a good person, but you have to still deal with the present. You have to still get through the current fights. You have to defend yourself and you have to keep speaking the truth. And if that means going on a podcast or if that means supporting others who are in their initial stages, of narcissistic abuse, or anything at all, going through a 12-step program, all that stuff is worth it. And so, that's kind of where I'm at now in taking those steps forward because this is beyond the current court fight. This goes into the rest of my daughter's life. You know, this is what I'm looking at. So you have to really find that strength. Yeah.
Well, I really wish all of the best for you. Everything that everything turns your way. You've been through a lot, and I just hope that you get to see your daughter. I know it's been a very, very long time since you've seen your daughter. And that your daughter is safe, and that you guys are able to create a safe life for yourselves after this is done, and have. I know it's going to be difficult, but to have some sort of peace, even though it'll probably be a fight for a long time. But I do, wish the best for you, because. You've just you poured your heart out here for everyone today, and shared your story, and you've done a service, because you did a really good job of pointing everything out, all of the different types of abuses, and just I know what you wanted to do today, and you did a really good job of it. So
okay.
So I really, just from the bottom of my heart and everyone out there, thank you for being part of the show, and it's been an honor for you to share your story with me today.
Well, I'm glad, and keep anytime you can get a Bruce Springsteen quote into your podcast, do it.
I want you to be taken to the promised land.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate it. And, it's everyone else listening, if you find a way to contribute and all the other people, it's amazing hearing their stories. It's so many, people really challenge stereotypes with everything that they're sharing here, and it's important. And, I think, I think that's it's I appreciate having the opportunity to contribute to. So I'm glad you do this, and hopefully hopefully something, even if it's just 2 minutes of what I said, if it helps another person, that's really good. That's kind of what I was aiming for. So
well, I think you're going to help a lot of people. So thank you for being on the show, Bruce. And
all right.
For everyone else who is listening, I hope you have a good night.